I never thought a spreadsheet could make me cry. But that's exactly what happened on a Thursday around 6:30 p.m., with the smell of overcooked rice still hanging in the air, and my youngest screaming for a second yogurt I couldn't afford to give him. My husband sat across the dinner table with his laptop open, his face calm, almost corporate. "I've been thinking," he said. "We need to be more disciplined financially." So I made us a tool. I wasn't worried. He worked in operations. Spreadsheets were his love language. I figured it was something about the mortgage or his 401k. He turned the screen toward me. It read monthly household budget, Q1 revision. Each category was color-coded groceries, utilities, kids' clothes, household items, and then me. A section called spouse discretionary spending. Total $220 month. Note to be approved for exceptions above this threshold. I thought it was a joke. I laughed, waiting for him to smile back. He didn't. Instead, he launched into an explanation like I was a new hire on his team. "Look, I know you've been trying, and I appreciate that, but we've got to stay lean. One income, remember? This just makes things easier for both of us." I stared at him. I wasn't working. That was true, but that was our decision. After our second baby, daycare would have eaten most of my salary anyway. He said, "I'll handle money. You handle home." Except now he wasn't handling the money. He was handling me. The first week was humiliating in ways I didn't expect. I asked him if I could get a new moisturizer. Mine had run out and the drugstore one dried my skin. He said, "You still have that travel-sized one from the hospital bag." Right, I asked if I could get a toy for our daughter's birthday. He replied, "Did you check if her cousin has something she can hand down?" By the second week, I'd stopped asking altogether. Not because I agreed, but because it was easier to go without than to explain why I needed body wash that didn't smell like pine tar. What broke me wasn't the limit, it was the logic. He made it all sound so reasonable. "You're better at planning meals, stick to the list. If you really want that book, ask for it for your birthday." I didn't say no, I said, "Let's talk about it." Every word wrapped in kindness, every refusal served with a smile. I wasn't being punished, I was being managed, and I started managing myself too. I tracked every dollar I spent, not out of control, but guilt. I cut my own hair in the bathroom with my old sewing scissors. I wore nursing bras with broken clips because no one sees them anyway. I stitched holes in socks, diluted hand soap, and turned off lights obsessively. He praised me for being resourceful. I hated myself for needing praise. One night my daughter came home from preschool with a paper crown she made out of construction paper and glitter. She ran up and said, "Here, Mommy, you're the queen of the house." I smiled like any mother would, and then I went into the laundry room. I closed the door, sat on the floor next to the dryer, and cried until my legs went numb. Because I wasn't a queen, I was a prisoner in a pretty house. I tried talking to my mom. She said, "At least he lets you buy what you need. Your father never even told me how much he made." I tried confiding in a friend. She said, "Girl, I wish my husband cared about our budget. Mine spends like a teenager." So I stopped trying. Instead, I began writing in my phone. In notes, in drafts, in half-finished grocery lists, not to journal. Just to remember who I was. You used to pitch campaigns to Fortune 500s. You once negotiated a raise higher than your boss's salary. You used to buy flowers for yourself after long weeks and not feel guilty. They weren't affirmations, they were lifelines. One night I couldn't sleep. I typed "women controlled by husband money" into YouTube expecting nothing useful. I found a podcast instead, hosted by a woman with a calm voice and sharp words. First line she said, "If you need permission to live, you're not a wife, you're a dependent." I sat straight up in bed, played it again and again and again. I didn't realize I was crying until my pillow was soaked. The next morning I packed the kid's lunch, ironed his shirt, smiled at the breakfast table. He told me how proud he was. "You've really taken this budget seriously." I said thank you, then watched him leave for work. And for the first time I whispered to myself, "This isn't love, this is control dressed up as care." And something inside me whispered back, "Then stop asking, start planning." I started saying no to things I used to say yes to. Lunch invites, birthday brunches, a paint and sip night with 2 moms from Ava's preschool. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't want to explain why I couldn't. It's just easier if I stay home, I'd text. What I meant was, I don't want to ask my husband for $30 and get a TED Talk in return. At first, my friends tried. Just come anyway, we'll split it. But after a few polite declines, the text slowed. Not out of cruelty, just convenience. People stop asking when they think the answer is always no. So I stopped getting invited. Not because I didn't belong, but because I'd made myself small enough to go unnoticed. The irony was, I was always there for everyone else. I ran the classroom snack calendar. I helped 3 moms design their kids' birthday invites. I brought soup to a neighbor with the flu. I was reliable, helpful, available. But no one noticed that I hadn't bought myself a new bra in 3 years, or that I wore the same 2 sweaters every week, or that I said, "I'm good, thanks," even when I was down to my last bottle of shampoo, stretched with water to make it last. There was a moment I remember like a snapshot. I was in the grocery store holding a box of cereal Ava liked. It was $4.79. The generic one was $2.09. I stood there for 6 minutes calculating, not just the price difference, but whether the smile on her face was worth the frown on his. Eventually, I put the cereal back, not because we couldn't afford it, but because I couldn't afford the conversation. He never yelled. He never called me names. He just made me account for things in a way that made me feel guilty for existing. Do we really need this? I thought we agreed on no extras this month. You know, I'm the only one bringing in money, right? He never said I was useless, but he didn't have to. I started saying it to myself. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. He works so hard I shouldn't complain. He's not abusive, he's just practical. But even practicality has a weight when it's stacked entirely on one side. And slowly, I began to crumble under it. The worst part, I wasn't even sure what I'd do with freedom anymore. What would I buy? Where would I go? The version of me who used to plan solo trips, who used to drink overpriced lattes and read books in bookstores for hours, she was gone. Replaced by a woman who budgeted bananas by ripeness, who apologized for needing lotion, who calculated her own worth in coupons. One afternoon, Ava was playing with her dolls, setting up a pretend school. She lined them up, pointed at one, and said in a stern voice, "You can't spend too much. Daddy said so." I froze. "Sweetie, what did you just say?" She giggled, not understanding. "I'm just playing like you and Daddy talk." I laughed with her, then went to the bathroom and cried silently behind the door, because my daughter thought being a woman meant asking before living. And somehow I'd taught her that without meaning to. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, I pulled out an old journal I hadn't touched in years. First page still had the sticker, "Dream, Plan, Do." It felt cruel now, but I opened to a blank page anyway, and I wrote, "I miss myself." Then I don't know where I went, but I think she's still here, somewhere. Beneath the receipts, behind the grocery lists. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have savings. I didn't even have the confidence to say, "This is wrong," out loud. But I had the ache. The slow, simmering ache of a woman who knows she deserves more, but doesn't know how to ask for it anymore. And sometimes that ache is the first spark. A few days later, I ran into Leah at Target. Leah, my old roommate from college, the one who used to call me a hurricane. Because I never did anything halfway. She looked surprised to see me. I probably looked like a ghost. We made small talk, kids, groceries, the usual. Then she said something that pierced me. "I miss your fire. You used to light up a room just talking about a pitch deck." I laughed it off. She handed me a business card. I freelance now, content stuff mostly. If you ever want to dip your toes back in, I've got too much work. I stuffed the card in my pocket, didn't look at it for 2 days. But when I finally did, something fluttered in my chest, tiny, scared, but alive. I wasn't ready to run, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, I was ready to stand. I didn't call Leah right away. I kept her business card in the silverware drawer beneath the dull steak knives and unmatched measuring spoons. Somewhere between, "I'm just curious," and "this could ruin everything." But I kept thinking about what she said. "You used to light up a room just talking about a pitch deck." I didn't miss the pitch decks, but I missed the light. A week later, I texted her, "Hey, do you still need help with content?" She replied within minutes, "Yes, I have something small." $60 if you want to try, $60. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had for myself in months. I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard, my stomach buzzing, like I was breaking a rule. And maybe I was, but I said yes. That night, after the kids were asleep and he was in the shower, I pulled out my old laptop. It was slow, dusty, and the charger had to be propped at a certain angle to work. I opened a blank document. The brief was simple. 5 captions for a yoga studio's spring promo. I stared at the screen for 20 minutes, unsure if I even knew how to form a sentence anymore. Then somehow my fingers started to move. It wasn't magic. I was rusty. I overthought every word. I Googled synonyms for breathe more times than I care to admit. But an hour later, I had 5 captions. I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since quitting my job: pride. Not for folding laundry, not for organizing snack bins, not for catching sales at the grocery store, but for doing something that used to be mine. Leah sent the payment 2 days later, $60 via PayPal. When I saw the notification, I froze. It felt surreal. That money didn't come from his paycheck. It didn't go through his account. It wasn't subject to his approval. It was mine. I transferred $50 into an old online savings account I hadn't used in years. It still had my maiden name on it. I renamed the account Not Asking Permission. The other $10 I bought myself a pastry and a small latte at a cafe with no play area, where no one asked me to cut grapes or clean up spills. I drank slowly. I didn't tell anyone, and it tasted like defiance. Over the next few weeks, Leah sent me more jobs. Nothing fancy. Captions, blog intros, simple rewrites. Sometimes I earned $30. Sometimes $80. Once even $125 for a bulk batch of Instagram posts about eco-friendly dish soap. I worked at night, sometimes at 1 a.m., sometimes at 4, sometimes on the bathroom floor so I wouldn't wake the baby. I was exhausted, but in a way that felt earned. I didn't tell my husband, not because I was hiding, but because I wasn't ready for the questions. What are you doing? Is someone paying you for this? Why didn't you tell me? And the worst one, do you really think this is worth your time? So I said nothing, but I started walking differently, thinking differently. Not because I was rich, but because I was building something that didn't belong to him. Then one night I opened my investment app. It hadn't been touched in years. The balance was laughable, barely over $100 from some random high school savings bonds that auto-transferred. But it existed, and so did I. I started reading again, finance blogs, beginner, investment guides, podcasts, hosted by women who looked like me, sounded like me, had been broken like me. One of them said, you don't have to be brilliant, just stubborn, just consistent, just willing to learn quietly while everyone thinks you've disappeared. That felt like me. I wasn't trying to beat the system. I was just tired of being beneath it. I set a goal. Every freelance check, 50% would go into that account. Even if it was just $15, even if it meant skipping that latte. This wasn't rebellion. This was restoration of identity, of power, of self. Then one night while researching low-risk ETFs, I stumbled across a familiar name, Ventec Systems. I blinked. That was where my husband worked. The logo looked odd on a financial report, sterile, corporate, impersonal. But there it was. I clicked, scanned, profit margins, leadership changes, strategic partnerships, and a small footnote in the corner: CEO retirement projected within 12 months. Succession planning in review. My heart raced. I didn't know why. It wasn't like I was buying anything yet. I didn't even fully understand the metrics, but something about it felt important, like a thread I didn't know I'd been following until I touched the end of it. I bookmarked the page, didn't act, didn't even write about it in my journal, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if the company that gives him a paycheck could someday answer to me? I laughed at the thought. Ridiculous, delusional. But sometimes a whisper is louder than a scream. I made my first investment with a kind of naive boldness that only comes from not knowing enough to be afraid. It was $200, money scraped together from 4 caption gigs, 1 blog post, and a refund from a canceled field trip. I put it into a company I'd never heard of before that week, Solar Nest Inc. Their homepage was sleek, their slogan was poetic, their CEO had great hair in interviews, and a finance influencer on YouTube called it undervalued with massive upside. That was enough for me. I clicked buy, exhaled, and stared at the green confirmation screen like I'd just signed my own emancipation papers. 3 days later, the stock plummeted. Apparently, there was an undisclosed lawsuit, then a leaked email, then a flood of angry investors bailing out. My $200 turned into $117, then $89, then $63. I froze, then panicked. I sold at $64.27, the lowest point of the week. It felt like my gut had collapsed inward. Not because I lost $135, but because I lost something scarier, the belief that I could do this, that I was smart enough, prepared enough, worthy enough. I didn't tell Leah. I didn't even tell my journal. I just closed my laptop, made the kids lunch, and went back to folding clothes like the past 3 weeks hadn't happened. That night, while stirring instant coffee over the stove, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. Baggy t-shirt, greasy hair, pale eyes. I looked like someone who gave up a long time ago, but I hadn't, not until now. I started thinking maybe I was wrong to try. Maybe this was all just some extended tantrum. Maybe I was better off sticking to budgets and baking muffins. Maybe some women weren't meant to be free. I know how horrible that sounds. But if you've ever been convinced you were small, long enough you start to shrink into the shape they made for you. To make things worse that night, he noticed something was off. We were lying in bed, and he scrolled through his phone. Casually asked, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I wanted to say I lost money, I worked hard for, and I feel like a fraud. But I just said, "Yeah, tired." He kissed my forehead and mumbled, "See, that's why I handle the big stuff." The next morning, I opened the not asking permission account. Balance $41.30. I almost transferred it back to our joint fund. Almost, but I didn't. I stared at the number for a long time. Then I opened the file where I tracked every freelance job. Each line had a timestamp, a payment, a topic, a note. Dog food blog, $35, delivered early. Mom influencer captions, $60. Client loved it. Yoga reels, $75, Leah said in reply. I scrolled through the list, not because I needed the money, but because I needed reminding. I built this. No one gave it to me. No one offered me grace or training wheels. I earned every damn dollar. And if I could do it once, I could do it again. Later that night, while the kids were asleep, I pulled my laptop back out. Not to invest, to learn. This time, no shortcuts, no YouTube hype. No get-rich-quick nonsense. I subscribed to 2 newsletters, downloaded an ebook called Investing for Women Who've Been Left Out, opened a new spreadsheet. This one wasn't titled Household Budget. It was called Ownership 101. One of the articles I read that night said something that hit me in the chest. You're not bad with money. You were just never taught to own it. And that was it, really. He wasn't smarter. He was just allowed. Allowed to fail. Allowed to try, allowed to believe he could. And me, I was always told to be safe, be careful, be grateful. But safety didn't buy me freedom, and caution didn't protect me from being treated like an employee in my own marriage. The next morning I brewed coffee again, same brand, same bitterness. But this time it didn't taste like failure. It tasted like fuel. A few days later, Leah called. She had a new client, a sustainable tech startup. Needed blog content and email sequences. It's a bit more involved, she said. You up for it? I almost said no, but I said yes. Not because I felt ready, but because I was done waiting to feel worthy. By the end of the week, I made back what I'd lost. And this time I didn't touch stocks. I just kept learning, observing. And in one of those quiet, late-night research sessions, a headline popped up. Ventec Systems confirms CEO Donovan to retire in Q2 next year. I clicked and smiled. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this. The company my husband worked for, the one that controlled his salary, his title, his sense of power. I was about to learn how it worked from the inside out. I didn't invest again right away. After Solar Nest, I needed time not just to recover the money, but to recover myself. The part of me that still flinched every time I made a decision without someone else's permission. So I did the only thing I could do without asking anyone. I learned. I became a student again. Not in a classroom, not with a syllabus or a professor. I studied in the bathroom at midnight, headphones in baby monitor on, while laundry spun in the background. I studied in the carpool line. I studied between meal preps and Target runs where I only bought what was on the list, even though I had my own money now, because knowledge still felt like something I had to earn in silence. I read everything I could get my hands on. Investing for women who are done being ignored. Financial abuse, the hidden power dynamic. ETF versus individual stocks, know your risk. I joined a private forum of women who were once in my shoes, some divorced, some still married, all building quietly in the shadows of men who thought they were nothing more than supportive wives. I didn't post much. I just watched, listened, absorbed. And slowly I built a new kind of power, the kind that doesn't ask to be seen. Meanwhile, at home, nothing changed on the surface. He still asked why the water bill was higher this month. Still said things like, "Babe, I really think we should stick to frozen vegetables. Fresh ones go bad too fast." Still forwarded articles titled, "Why Stay-at-Home Moms Need Financial Guidance," as if he were doing me a favor. Sometimes I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because he was talking to the version of me he thought still existed, the version he trained to be small, agreeable, quiet. But that woman was gone, or rather she was studying. Then one day, while cross-referencing company performance metrics for a mock portfolio exercise, I ran into a familiar name again, Ventec Systems, my husband's company. I hesitated. Something about it felt too close, too personal, but I clicked anyway. Their financials were solid, modest growth, stable leadership, strong retention. But what caught my eye wasn't in the numbers. It was in the wording of a shareholder letter. "We are actively identifying transitional leadership to support post-Donovan era stability." Donovan, his CEO, the one my husband talked about like a deity. Apparently, he was retiring early. The company hadn't announced it publicly yet, but here was hidden in plain sight. I kept reading: succession planning, department reorganization, opening investor outreach opportunities. Suddenly, Ventec wasn't just his job. It was a machine I could learn to operate. A system with levers and gears, and I was finally starting to understand where the pressure points were. But I didn't act yet. I wasn't ready to invest again. Instead, I built a new spreadsheet. Not just for money, but for timing. I listed events, Q1 financial reports, board meeting schedules, projected CEO exit, new product launches. I created filters, tracked movement, set alerts. I wasn't a wife peeking into her husband's work anymore. I was an analyst, and I loved it. One night, while I was reviewing stakeholder sentiment graphs, he walked past me with a bowl of popcorn. Still on Pinterest, he asked, half joking. I minimized the window, smiled, just browsing. He kissed my forehead like I was the good little housewife he believed he molded. And for once, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. Because he didn't know I was already building the foundation beneath his world. Around that time, Leah asked if I wanted to co-pitch a client. "You're killing it," she said. "They love your voice. You've got real structure." I said no, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew where my focus needed to be now. This wasn't about building a freelance career. This was about something bigger, longer, and much, much quieter. The money was still small, a few hundred a month, but I used it differently now. Half into cash reserves, half into my investment fund. And I didn't chase excitement. I went for low volatility, index funds, dividend reinvestment, long-term ETFs. Because I wasn't betting on stock tips anymore, I was betting on discipline. One afternoon, while sorting laundry, I overheard my husband on the phone. He was venting to a colleague. "I swear, if Donovan leaves and the next CEO is another damn spreadsheet guy, I'm gone." He laughed. "I should have been promoted last year. But you know, them never ask the guys who do the real work." I folded a towel and smiled to myself, because soon I'd be in the room where those decisions were discussed. And the men like him would never suspect the woman folding his socks had any say. It started with just 2 shares, tiny, insignificant, barely a ripple in the market. But to me, they felt like something else entirely, a key, a single silent turn in a lock I'd been trapped behind for too long. Ventec's stock wasn't flashy, no viral headlines, no roller coaster spikes, but it was steady, predictable, and more importantly, I understood it, because I was watching it from two sides: the public reports and the man who brought its problems home every night. Every time he complained about upper management being clueless, every frustrated rant about middle managers playing politics, every whisper about departmental reorgs, he was giving me intel, unwittingly, freely. While he vented, I took notes. While he sulked about someone else getting credit, I bookmarked financial patterns. He thought he was safe because I was silent. He forgot silence is a survival tactic, and sometimes a strategy. I bought more shares each month. Nothing that would trigger alarms, no large sudden buys, just a quiet, consistent flow from my freelance fund. 5 shares, then 10, then 20 more. Each time I clicked confirm purchase, I whispered the same thing to myself: he doesn't know. He'll never see it coming. By the end of Q2, I owned enough to be invited to a shareholder webcast. Nothing dramatic, just a video briefing with optional Q&A. I didn't speak, but I listened, and what I heard wasn't just dry numbers. It was discontent, concerns, fractures beneath the shiny executive facade, and among them, opportunity. Around this time, Leah noticed I'd been distant. She asked if I was okay. I told her half-truths, just thinking about the long game. She smiled. That's how I know you're serious now. One night, my husband came home in a mood, tossed his laptop bag on the couch, loosened his tie like he was unraveling. I swear to God, if they put Rachel over me, I'm done. Rachel, his colleague, sharper, younger, already presenting to senior leadership. She knows how to play the room, he muttered. And what do you do? I asked gently. He scoffed. I do the work. I don't need to play games. I stirred dinner. Quiet. But in my head I filed it under, he doesn't know how succession works. Because power isn't about who works hardest. It's about who sees the game board, and I was already 2 moves ahead. A week later, I got an email. Subject line, small stake strategic voice. It was from Ventec's investor relations. They were reaching out to mid-level shareholders for optional insights, a move often used to signal upcoming internal changes. They wanted to know, how did I view the company's direction? Did I have input? Would I like to participate in a private feedback group? I reread the email 3 times. Then calmly, confidently, I replied, yes, I'd be honored. Suddenly, I wasn't just a number in the system. I was in the loop. And in that loop, I saw everything changing. New executive search firms being briefed, policy drafts for operational clarity across departments, evaluation reports on department heads, including his, and then came the file I wasn't supposed to see. An HR advisory report attached accidentally in a packet meant for review. It referenced multiple internal complaints in the ops team, anonymous but time-stamped. And one note stood out, repeated dismissiveness from middle management team member toward female colleagues. Recommendation: observe Q3 behavior for potential demotion consideration. No name, but the timeline matched his last 3 months exactly. I didn't say a word. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask. I just observed. And in the next shareholder feedback meeting, when asked which departments needed cultural reassessment, I marked operations, mid-level. That's all. No accusations, no drama, just a tick box. But sometimes a single mark is enough to tip a scale. At dinner, he asked if I thought the company was getting weird lately. I said nothing. He laughed. You wouldn't get it anyway. Whole thing's a mess. I smiled. Maybe they just need someone who sees things clearly. He didn't respond, and I didn't need him to. That night, I updated my spreadsheet. I had 140 shares, not a majority, not even close, but enough to be a voice, and voices shape conversations. I wasn't planning a coup. I wasn't hungry for revenge. I just wanted balance, and the only way to get it was to become the person no one thought to watch. The email came on a Thursday. Subject line, confidential invitation, Q3 Strategic Review Board, venture class stakeholders only. I stared at it for almost a full minute. Ventec had officially moved me into a closed circle review group. a panel of influential mid-level investors meant to advise on upcoming decisions, one step below the board, one step above just another shareholder. And among the talking points, Q3 infrastructure proposal, presented by Internal Operations Unit. Lead Mr. Richard Bennett. Richard, my husband. He had spent the past 2 weeks rehearsing that very proposal, at home, at the dinner table, in the shower. This pitch gets me into exec track, he said. If this lands, I'll finally have leverage. I listened quietly each time. I knew the numbers better than he did, because I'd already read the pre-briefing report. As a stakeholder, the meeting was virtual but formal. No cameras, just audio slides and strategic input protocols. Each member identified by investor code, not real names. I logged in under my holding alias G, Harper Capital Private. He began his pitch at 9:03 a.m., voice firm, confident. A little too eager. At Ventec, we've hit a plateau in logistics cost efficiency. My proposal introduces a distributed model via resource deployment, cutting idle time by 18%, and projected to boost ROI by 7.3% within 2 quarters. The same numbers I helped him rehearse unknowingly across casserole dishes and toddler meltdowns. He finished. The moderator opened the floor for anonymous strategic comments. I said nothing, but another voice, female calm, offered a different view. The numbers are promising, but the language and model mirror a failed strategy from Q4 2018. I'd recommend requesting revision before funds are committed. Another investor agreed, then another. The room shifted. Proposal pending revision. Funding paused. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just clicked delay approval, request model update. And with that, my husband's golden ticket was folded and filed away. He came home late that night, quiet, sat at the dinner table with his tie still on. I asked how it went. He forced a laugh, weird energy in the room. Felt like someone tanked the flow. I said nothing, just refilled his glass of water. That weekend, he paced the living room for hours. They want a revision. That shouldn't have happened. The numbers were tight. He tossed papers cursed under his breath, blamed the internal politics that always reward talkers, not doers. I watched him unravel, not with joy, but with clarity, because this wasn't just about a pitch. It was about the first time in years he realized he wasn't in control, and he didn't even know who took that away. The next week, his manager called. He was off the proposal. Rachel, the one he once mocked for playing the room, was taking over. He sat on the couch in silence for over an hour. No anger, just hollow. He finally looked at me and said, "I think something's shifting in the company. I don't know what's going on anymore." I met his eyes and said the only thing I could say with a straight face, "Maybe it's just time for new leadership." He nodded slowly, and I excused myself to go put the kids to bed before my composure cracked. That night, I opened my investment dashboard. My holdings in Ventec had crossed a milestone. I now owned enough to attend investor policy review sessions with speaking access. I clicked on next month's calendar, Q4 policy review, performance evaluation, mid-level ops. I added a private note under the session title, "Do not save him." I still hadn't told him anything, not about the shares, not about the meetings, not about how weeks ago I marked his department as under reassessment in a survey that fed directly into executive HR review. He thought the world was shifting under his feet. What he didn't realize was I was the one tilting the ground. But here's the thing. I didn't feel like a villain. I wasn't plotting revenge in some backlit office with a smirk and a martini. I was still folding laundry, still paying bills, still smiling through parent-teacher conferences. The only difference I now understood that power isn't loud. Power is quiet, precise. It doesn't slam doors. It signs off on who gets to walk through them. He found out on a Sunday. Of all days, the one where I usually made pancakes and we pretended to be a normal family for at least 2 hours. It started when he borrowed my iPad to look up something for Ava's science project. I had forgotten to log out of my email, not the personal one, the investor inbox. He clicked. At first, I don't think he understood what he was looking at. Meeting invites, analyst briefings, portfolio breakdowns, a performance evaluation chart with the Ventec logo in the corner. and one email that said, "Thank you for your input, G. Harper. Your recommendations have been submitted to the Executive Committee for Q4 Performance Review." He walked into the kitchen holding the iPad like it was burning. "What the hell is this?" I didn't flinch. I was pouring milk for the kids' cereal. "Investor correspondence," I said. "Investor," he echoed. "You're an investor in my company." I looked up. "I'm an investor in a company you happen to work for. That's not the same thing." He blinked, tried to laugh. It came out dry. "This some kind of joke you bought? What a few stocks." "You think that means something I didn't answer?" I didn't need to, because he already knew. Deep down, he understood. This wasn't a fluke. This had been building. "How long?" he asked. "Over a year," I replied. "With what money mine?" That's when his face shifted. Not anger, not yet. Confusion, wounded ego, realization. "So what, you've been spying on me? Using me?" I looked him in the eye. "I've been surviving you." Silence. "I never controlled your life," he said. "No," I replied. "You just controlled mine." Softly, repeatedly, with a smile. "This is betrayal," he said. "You're trying to ruin me. I'm trying to remember who I am." He stormed out of the house for 2 hours. No calls, no texts. I didn't chase. When he came back, he didn't yell. He sat on the couch, stared at nothing, and said, "Do you hate me?" I stood in the doorway, not with fury, but with clarity. "No, I just don't need you to define me anymore." That night, I opened the laptop, pulled up my holdings, selected transfer stake. I didn't sell. I just moved it into a different account, still mine, but clean, separate. I closed the joint credit card the next morning, called a lawyer for separation mediation by lunch. Didn't announce it, didn't threaten it, just acted the way he always did. When I told him I wanted a legal split, he looked gutted. Not because he loved me, but because he couldn't explain me anymore. I didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't give him the monologue he probably expected. I just packed my things, signed the papers, and left him standing in the house he once believed he ruled. The kids, they didn't cry, because I didn't cry. I told them the truth, gently. Mommy and Daddy are going to live in different houses. But that doesn't mean we love you any less. And they believed me, because for the first time I looked whole when I said it. In the months that followed, I didn't become rich, didn't buy a penthouse, didn't start a billion-dollar empire. I just got myself back. One line of code, one client email, one quarterly report at a time. I built a life no longer shaped by someone else's permission. And him, he stayed at Ventec barely. No promotion, no proposals. Just a man in a suit at a desk in a company that no longer bent to his voice. Sometimes I wonder if he ever figured it out, that it wasn't Rachel or politics or bad timing, it was me, the woman he underestimated, who folded his shirts, who whispered okay for years, who finally said nothing and changed everything. I never gave him a goodbye speech, but if I had, maybe it would have gone like this. You gave me an allowance. I gave myself ownership. It's been 14 months since I left. Since I packed 2 suitcases, kissed my kids goodbye, with promises I intended to keep, and walked out of the house where I once asked for permission to buy conditioner. I don't miss the house. I don't even miss the marriage. What I do miss, oddly, is the version of me who stayed in that place long enough to learn exactly what kind of cage she was in. Because now I don't just recognize the bars, I know how they're built. And more importantly, I know how to dismantle them. I live in a smaller apartment now. It's nothing fancy, but every piece of furniture in here was picked by me, paid by me, chosen for no other reason than I wanted it. That alone makes this place a palace. I kept the not asking permission account. It's still active, still private. But now it has a new function. It funds other women like me. It started small. A friend of a friend, divorced, 2 kids, controlled by a man who wasn't abusive, just strict with money. She needed $200 to take an online course in UX design. Her ex said no, so I said yes. She passed, landed a remote job within 5 months. She called me crying. I didn't know I could do this. You changed my life. I told her the truth. No, you did. I just helped you skip the part where you had to ask permission. After that, I registered the fund. She signs now. A microgrant initiative for women recovering from financial control and coercion. We don't ask for sob stories. We don't need tears. We just need proof of effort. And every month we choose 5 women, 5 ladders to build, because no one should have to jump without a net. I mentor now too, quietly, under a pseudonym. I show women how to read contracts, how to spot manipulation wrapped in spreadsheets, how to claim financial agency without waiting for validation. And sometimes, late at night, I get messages like, he tells me I should be grateful. He makes me text him receipts. He says, I don't contribute. I don't respond with rage, I respond with reminders. Contribution is not always visible. You are not a line item. Gratitude does not equal submission. I met one of them last week. We sat at a small cafe. She had a folder in her lap and a nervous smile. You probably think I'm silly, she said. I'm just trying to get certified to teach ESL online. I shook my head. I once cried over $4 cereal. There's nothing silly about freedom. She looked at me. How did you know you'd make it out? I didn't lie. I didn't. So why did you try? I paused, then said, because I was done living like I was optional. That's what this is in the end. Not a revenge story, not a financial triumph, not even justice porn. This is a woman remembering her name, her worth, her voice, and making damn sure no one ever puts her back. On a budget again. I don't tell people I escaped. I say I architected my way out, and now I help others build their exits too. So if you're listening to this wherever you are, holding a receipt you're afraid to show, wearing a sweater you haven't replaced in years, telling yourself it's not that bad. Let me say this, you're not broken, you're just buried, and buried things can rise. He gave me an allowance. I gave myself a legacy.